Today's episode, however, I would love to wrap up this wealth strategy mini series with a deep dive talk about. So, it's really important to know as an investor that investment debt or any debt that you take on to go invest in an asset is treated differently to. It's my duty to let you know about some pitfalls of property or some let's not go all in on the property train. Some things to note before we just back in 2015 when I became an investor, I didn't exactly understand the power of. Welcome back to Millionaires Are Made, the podcast. Now, if you're new to the room, I'm Michelle Gruhl. I'm a self-made, soul-led multimillionaire, business owner, investor, wife, mum of two, and women's wealth coach. I am your hype woman for all things strategy plus energetics. I want wealth to flow to you while you sleep. Now, programming note. So today is part 4 of our 4-part wealth strategy mini series. Hang tight because wealth energetics is deeply powerful as well, but we can't ignore the strategy that helped me build my millions. And the more that we have the conversation about the strategy and normalize what it takes to build millions, the more accessible it becomes for every single woman to claim her wealth. So, in the mini series, on the first one, we calculated your net wealth, your assets minus your liabilities. And then we figured out where your starting point is for today. In the next episode of the mini series, we looked at okay, well, if this is where you are, what is your financial freedom number? That is how you replace your current income. So, what asset base would you need to become financially free on today's income? And we also tracked your dream life number. Because remember when I first set out with my financial freedom, thinking that would be the end goal, once I got there, I thought, we did it in 9 years. We thought it would take 15. Let's see what we can do and go to our dream life number. Amplify it, claim it, and go for more. In the last episode, I then talked about, well, okay, if this is your net wealth, this is where you are, and this is where you want to go, your dream life number, how on earth are you going to get there? And so we talked about the power of assets. Remember that assets are a way to grow our wealth in a way that cash never can. If we only have cash, it's susceptible to this thing called inflation. And inflation is eating away at your cash at about 2.5% per annum. So we need to use assets to funnel our cash into assets so that our cash doesn't dissolve. And rather than dissolving from the inflation, we are actually getting growth. So we want to pick assets that are beating inflation. And we had a look at a whole pile of different assets. We had a look at properties, stocks, shares. We were looking at things like crypto, even things like investing in art, right? And I talked about all the different types of assets. Today's episode, however, I would love to wrap up this wealth strategy mini series with a deep dive talk about property. Now, I'm not just the property queen, but I certainly am a property queen and I love real estate. Real estate has been very good to me and it's been something that we've invested in over the years. And it has certainly helped us grow our wealth. So I want to take you behind the scenes today and have a look at my exact portfolio and give you some numbers to open up your mind to the power of property. So pour that cup of coffee and pop on the headphones or go for a walk because now it is time to dive right in to the bricks and mortar love of the millionaire blueprint, which is investing in property. So let's talk about why I love property. So when picking an asset class, we're considering all sorts of things, right? Return on investment, what it will cost to get me into the market, how liquid is the asset, and how fast is it going to get me to my financial freedom number. Now, the reason that I love property so much is for leverage. And I feel like if it wasn't for leverage, property may not be so desirable because, of course, when we're investing in real estate, we have a whole pile of other things to think about that you wouldn't have to think about if you're only investing in the stock market, for example. So in the stock market, it is essentially a transaction on a piece of paper. Money goes from here to there and it grows. Done. That's pretty much it. Now, with property, there are all sorts of little ins and outs throughout the year that I need to attend to. Some emails to property managers, just looking at tenants that might come and go, repairs to property, just to name a few, really. So, why would I choose property over just the stock market? Again, this is not an either or. This is just a discussion around why I love it so much. So, property to me becomes really attractive because of this one thing called leverage. So, if you don't know what leverage is, I guess it's like a lever. It helps me move a bigger asset base than I could do on my own by leveraging the bank's money or investment debt. Now, as a self-made multimillionaire, I don't have any personal debt. I know we've all been taught that debt is bad, that all debt is bad. And remember, yes, I was in credit card debt when I was 25. So I certainly understood that debt wasn't good. However, not all debt is the same. So it's really important to know as an investor that investment debt or any debt that you take on to go invest in an asset is treated differently to personal debt. So I like to look at investment debt like a big lever that helps me hold a larger asset base. So if I can take on the bank's money plus some of my money, let's just say the bank's 80% and my 20%, and go purchase a large asset. And now from the day that I buy it, I'm getting growth on the whole piece of the pie. Even though I only had to pay for 20% of the pie, I get growth on the whole piece of the pie. Well, that's quite attractive to me as an investor. Now, again, property arguably as a whole might do a 6, 7, 8% return, and shares might be more like a 8, 9, 10% return. So we're doing slightly less in terms of return. However, how much I can hold is greater. So let me give you an example of that in a moment. But that is one reason why I love property. Now, property, of course, gives you some cash flow as well. You'll get capital growth is how I have made most of my wealth, but you'll also get the rental income, and that's fine. Some people choose property just to have it paid off and have some cash come to them every month. Property is not really a great cash flow asset, but sure, it will produce money for you. Then, of course, there are things like the tax perks, right? So depreciation expense. So I do new build homes, and therefore for the first 30 years, you get depreciation expense as a write-off for that property. So if I'm making profits from my company and they're flowing into the property trust, and it'll then get washed through the property income, and therefore the depreciation expense will deduct the amount from my profits. We'll get into that a little bit later because that's another whole discussion. But there are some tax perks, of course, with property. And, it beats inflation. Property beats inflation in general, right? So that is why I love it too, because I need to have my cash somewhere that is going to beat inflation. So let's dive in a little more to leverage, because I feel like the discussion around leverage is a really important one. And back in 2015, when I became an investor, I didn't exactly understand the power of leverage. And now I have a decade of data which shows me exactly how powerful leverage is. And so I'm more excited than ever to continue investing. So leverage works like this. Let's just say you've got $120,000 of cash. You take that to the bank, and if the bank is going to give you, just ask for a 20% deposit, they will then give you the remainder of cash so that you can go buy a $600,000 asset or house. So now I've got $120K cash of mine, but I've purchased a $600,000 asset. Like nowhere else can you own something that is $600,000, get growth on $600,000 without me actually needing to have $600,000. So this is quite an incredible, magical thing, leverage, right? And something so powerful that we all need to understand. So let's just imagine with this example that the market, let's just say the property does a 7% growth in a year. So that $600,000 asset that I own, remember, and I get growth on the whole thing, even though I only have paid for 20% of it, I now have $642,000 of an asset at the end of the year. So I've earned $42,000 in equity. Not bad. Now, remember, I only put in 120K of cash and I've received 42,000 back. So if you think about it like that all I had to put in was 120K and I've made 42K. If someone came to me with a deal like that, a 30% cash on cash return, I would be saying absolutely yes. I want 35% back from my money, right? Now, of course, this is not even taking into account any rental income, tax perks, or any of that stuff, just purely growth alone for that asset. Leverage, the ability to have only, in some cases, 10%, in other cases, 20% as cash to go purchase 100% of this product that I then get growth on the whole thing. Well, that's really powerful. And now you amplify that by 1 property, 2 property, 3 property, 4 properties, recycling the equity that you have growing, and you soon have a very powerful wealth machine. Now, before I fall too much in love with property, I think as your wealth bestie, it's my duty to let you know about some pitfalls of property or some let's not go all in on the property train. Some things to note before we just get into it. So yes, I love property, but I also love diversification. So if I'm looking at property, I have to understand that it's not a liquid asset. So the cost of getting into the property market and the cost of getting out when I'm looking at things like stamp duty or capital gains tax, and time on the market and finding a buyer and buyer's fees and all of that. It's not really super easy, even though on paper I've made the money. It's not super easy to get in and out of the market quickly. It's not a liquid asset. So if I decide I want to liquidate my entire property portfolio, there's going to be all sorts of things I need to take into account. It's not going to happen the next day. If I need cash tomorrow for my holiday, I can't really take it from the house. Now, also to note that in order to actually liquidate it, you would need to sell the whole thing. You can't exactly just say, well, I want to sell part of my house. Now, of course, there is this thing called an equity release. So if you've got equity in the home, you could potentially check with your financial advisors, potentially go to your broker and ask, maybe you want to release some equity. That could be a way to get some cash. But other than that, if we want to realize our profits or our wealth growth, we need to sell the asset. So then it's a lumpy asset. It's hard to get in, hard to get out. So let's just have a little look at an example of, okay, what would it look like if I just kept cash? And what would it look like if I started investing in property? For example, let's just imagine there's 2 people. There's Sarah and there's Lisa. Identical incomes and radically different outcomes. Now, let's just imagine that Sarah just sticks to cash. She's got a high interest saver, but maybe that high interest saver is giving her 4% per annum. Remember, inflation, 3%, 2.5%. So she's really only gaining 1 to 1.5% because she's only just beating inflation. So let's imagine Sarah just sticks to putting her cash into a savings account. And then over here, we can imagine that Lisa follows the Millionaire Blueprint and she starts investing in assets. And she actually saves for a house deposit and she purchases a home. All right, now over here, we've got Sarah. She is saving $20,000 per year and we're looking at inflation of 2.5%. So 20K a year. After 10 years, she's got 240K balance, but her real gain is really only 1.5% because that's the difference with inflation. So she's really only managed to grow her wealth by $3,600. Pretty sad for a decade. Now, over here, we've got Lisa who's using that same 20K a year. She's going to save up for a house deposit. Now, it's going to take her 4 years to get to the 80K. Maybe she'll go buy a unit for 400K, let's just say. So she gets the investment unit with her $80,000 of cash. She gets an LVR of 80%. So loan to value, she's getting 80% borrowed from the bank, 20% is her money. So 20% deposit is $80,000. The rest the bank is going to pay for. But remember, she now gets growth on the whole piece of the pie. So she's going to use that 80K cash and get growth on $400,000. Now, let's just imagine that that unit grows by, say, 7% for the year. For the next, so it took her 4 years to save up. So now she's got 6 years growth. Now, with those 6 years of growth on the $400,000 unit, it has now become a $600,000 unit. There's also going to be things that the tenant's paying for the rent, and perhaps the tenant's even paying for some of the principal and interest repayments. You're going to be looking at things like depreciation expense, which could be another 15K, let's just say, of tax perks, depending on her situation. So we've got Lisa over here purchasing property that now is a value of $600,000. And you've got Sarah over here that put it into cash, and she has $240,000. Now, the net difference, of course, because Lisa still has a bit of a mortgage, but her growth is 330K of equity. So that's a 4 times return compared to Sarah that barely beat inflation. So this is a good example of the power of investing in assets that you can hold and get the growth on all of it versus sitting it over in cash with no leverage and barely beating inflation. So certainly if you're looking at one property, that's great. Now she could then use her equity to go get another property similar to what I did, and again and again. So now we're up to 5, and you can just continue on that train until the base that you have matches your financial freedom number. Okay, so we've been through an enormous amount of information today on why I love property so much. And let's just do a quick recap so that you can leave feeling empowered and ready to make some decisions for yourself. So some of the things I love about property, of course, are the leverage, right? Leverage, being able to own a bigger asset using less of my money and getting growth on the whole of the asset. So leverage, the fact that you get not only income from a property, but you also get growth in the property. There are also tax perks, chat to your accountant, things like depreciation expense that you can, and other deductions that you can use. And it's really important to know before you purchase a property, you want to make sure you got the right entity structures set up to purchase it. Again, that's something to chat to your accountant about and your financial planner. And again, why I love property is because it's much better than cash. Because if we've got our money in cash, we are not beating inflation, and that is not a vibe. We need to grow your wealth faster than inflation. So we really need to have it over in an asset like property. Now, just to recap on the downfalls or the pitfalls, I guess, or the things to be aware of with property, it's not a liquid asset. It's lumpy. So it takes longer to get in, longer to get out. Just take that into consideration. Concentration risk. So we wouldn't want to have it all our eggs in one basket, but even within property, you don't want to have all your eggs in one capital city, in my opinion. And then, of course, another thing to think about is the cash flow that is required for the property. You don't want to be left without a cash buffer for each. So if this sounds like a vibe and you're ready to get started, you have mapped your net wealth, you know where you are, you know where you want to go, and you've got an idea that maybe property will be a part of that. Step 1 is to get a broker. Go have a chat. Find a broker, somebody that can be your BFF to help shop the banks for you. You need to know your borrowing power, and that will help decide what type of property you can purchase. Number 2, you want to make sure you've got a buyer's agent or you're using some type of agency to help you purchase your property, because flying blind and just picking it yourself, unless you know a lot about property, it's not exactly something that I would do. I would rather outsource that to the experts. Okay, number 3, of course, is I want you to map it into your net wealth. Have a look at where you are. Have a look at what would happen. What's the scenario going to look like if you purchase a property here in 2 more years, and continue on so that you are in control of your net wealth map. The power really is within you. It's not up to your financial planner. It's not up to the property purchaser. It's not up to your broker to know where you're going with your wealth. You need to know where you're going with your wealth, and you drive your financial team. All right. Now, thank you so much for tuning into all of that deep information there. And this sums up our 4-part mini series on wealth strategy. Now, I hope you're ready and buckled up, because Wealth Energetics is my next mini series. And I'm going to show you exactly how to anchor in to the identity of a wealthy woman that will magnetize more money and absolutely amplify your road to financial freedom. The reason I did it in 9 years and it didn't take me 15 has a lot to do with wealth energetics. So, wealth energetics gets to be your superpower. We're going to layer that over the top of your understanding of basic strategy, wealth strategy, which we all need to know. And then we're going to have a whole lot of fun over in wealth energetics so that you can take the power back and amplify your wealth. All right. So that's it here. Chase those bigger salaries if you want them, but we're getting off that income earning hamster wheel. Assets are the machines that are going to make you money while you sleep. So calculate how many you need, commit to it, and just watch it compound. Millionaires aren't born, millionaires are made, which is exactly where we are headed together. So chart your asset game plan. Queen, take one bold action in the next 24 hours. Come DM me and let's chat. Let's shrink that gap faster than you ever imagined. And of course, we are going to make your millions inevitable. We'll speak soon.